Hello everybody and welcome to World Astrology with Kesenya. I'm Kesenya and I am so happy you've found your way to the channel. We've so much to explore together as we look at the big picture cycles and the global shifts written in the stars. Now, whether you're here for the deep dives or whether you're just curious about how astrology shapes our world, I'm truly glad that you're part of this community. Before we get started, if you enjoy what you see, please hit that like button, share this video with a friend, and subscribe so that you don't miss any of the updates. It makes a huge difference in helping the algorithm connect these videos with others who are looking for this kind of perspective. I'm so glad you're here, but let's get right into today's chart. Today we are looking at the incredible collapse of the Babylonian Assyrian Empire and how it is reflected in today's astrology. Be prepared to be blown away. Let's begin with a look at the last Bronze Age. Although many believe history to be very dry and boring, understanding the past is the only way to comprehend the future, especially in astrology. I want to begin by looking at a chart from Wikipedia showing what the mainstream consensus is regarding the collapse of the Intermediate Bronze Age. We'll go to that chart right now. So you can see a chart from Wikipedia on your screen showing the approximate dates of the classical Bronze Age and their effects and their rise and fall in the Near East, Mesopotamia, and Egypt. That's listed down the left-hand side there. What we really want to hone in on is what was happening in Mesopotamia, the second in the list. So let's look. We have a list at the bottom showing 3000 BC, 2500 BC, 2000 BC, 1500 BC, and 1000 BC, which covers the majority of the classical Bronze Age. What we are looking at here is the Babylonian and Assyrian Empire in the Mesopotamian list. If you can see that there, hopefully it's nice and clear. The Babylonian Assyrian Empire finished, collapsed, gave out, according to this chart, around 1700 BC. I really want you to ingrain in your mind that 1700 BC date for the end of the Babylonian Assyrian Empire, because that is a key focal point in what we're going to be looking at for the rest of this video. I feel, given the astrology and given the history of, in this case, the Babylonian Assyrian Empire, that it really did herald a strong change that is very noticeable in the Bronze Age cycle. We know that this particular period, the Assyrian Babylonian Empire, was occurring during the Intermediate Bronze Age, which, according to the chart we've just looked at, collapsed at around 1550 BC. That's according to this chart, that's when the Intermediate Bronze Age collapsed. But the Assyrian Babylonian Empire collapsed a little earlier than that. Now, here's what the internet has to say about that period in history, and I quote, "Key characteristics of the Intermediate Bronze Age include, firstly, settlement patterns. A shift from large urban centres to small dispersed rural settlements, often located in peripheral areas. The societal organisation of the time was a transition from the centralised city-states to decentralised non-urban communities with evidence of social stratification as seen in elaborate mortuary practices and fortifications. Economic shifts. There was a move at this time towards specialised pastoralism and long-distance trade. Now, keep in mind that from the initial chart we've just looked at, the collapse of the Intermediate Bronze Age actually brought an end to this emphasis that I've just described and a movement into differing settlement patterns, differing organisational structures, and differing economics at the time of the collapse of the Intermediate Bronze Age. So what I've just described the Intermediate Bronze Age and the types of culture that were around predominantly at that time, and then we collapsed into a whole differing society. Now this occurred around 1700 to 1500 BCE. These collapses of empires often take a couple of hundred years to be fully imbued. Okay, with that first piece of information in mind, let's move to our next point, the great cycle of time. At this juncture, I'd like to review the concept of the Yuga cycle. The Great Yuga cycle is a foundational concept in Hindu cosmology that describes the cyclical nature of time, the cyclical nature of human consciousness, and the cyclical moral fabric of the universe. It's truly fascinating. The Great Yuga cycle suggests that time is not linear. We're not increasing out of a great bang per se, but life itself is moving in these vast, repetitive loops, repetitive cycles. This is where the world experiences a gradual decline in spiritual purity before being reset and rising up towards a great spiritual age. And then dropping down, it's called the fall in the Bible, and in many other scriptures it has other terminologies, but a drop down into impurity and a rise up into purity and all that goes with it. Plato referred to this as the Great Year. It is purported to last between 24 to 26,000 years. The exact year number is a little hard to pinpoint given the great extent of time that this is covering. Many modern day researchers consider that our solar system and its sun at the center may actually be in a binary system, a 25 to 26,000 year cycle with another star. Now this is similar to 80% of the stars in the universe that are in binary or more companionship models. Many of the stars we see, 80% of them in the night sky, are actually more than one star moving cohesively in a cycle together. So this is the process that actually can align with the precession of the equinoxes, and it does much to explain how the Yuga cycle might actually work in a scientific model. In the Yuga cycle cosmology, when our sun, let's say it's my little pointy finger here, is closest to its binary companion, we are at this high spiritual age, an age that is referred to in almost every ancient culture. Heaven, Valhalla, Avalon, you name it, every ancient culture has something to say about this heaven experience. But it's not necessarily a place we go when we die. It is the golden age, when our sun and its binary companion are at their closest proximity. This is a spiritual state of absolute dharma, a time of absolute truth, long life, direct communication with the divine. The world in this golden age and its inhabitants flourish with good health, community, and prosperity, and there is a complete lack, thank God, of war, disease, exploitation, corruption, and abuse. That is what the golden age is all about. Then, after the golden age comes the silver age, as our sun and its binary companion begin to move further and further apart in their cycle. And during this time, we drop down into a lesser age of consciousness. Still quite high conscious, high spirituality, goodness, light, beauty, all the good stuff. But the drop down from the golden age is occurring. As the two move further and further apart, we get to the bronze age, which is a little lower in consciousness. And then further on, when they're at their absolute polarity from one another, this cycle of the sun and its binary companion indicates a move into the Iron Age. In Hindu cosmology, it's referred to as the Kali Yuga. You may have heard that term. It means the lowest vibration of our consciousness as a collective of mankind upon the earth. Humanity is at its lowest state. And instead of golden age heaven, we're in utter hell. There is abuse, corruption, greed, deceit, war, disease. Guess what age we have just come through as a human collective, according to Sri Yukteswar. That's right, the Kali Yuga or the Iron Age. But the good news is that after this polarity, we have this spiritual reset or a reset towards the climb back to the binary companions coming together, because everything is cyclical and moves in cycles, even big cycles of 24 to 26,000 years. So let's take a look at a diagram to help us understand this concept a little more. So here is a diagram explaining roughly the great year. You can see at the top we have the Satya Yuga, which is the golden age, and it lasts a long time. Roughly, according to this diagram, it's lasting almost 10,000 years. Thank God the golden age lasts so long by comparison with the iron age at the bottom. You can see it down the bottom there. But after the golden age, we have a fall downwards. If you look on the right-hand side, there's a little arrow and it's pointing downwards, suggesting that we cycle out of the golden age and collapse in consciousness into the silver age, or in this case, the Trecha Yuga. That then lasts roughly 3,600 years, and then we have another fall again into a lower level of consciousness, the Dwapara Yuga, or the Bronze Age, the previous Bronze Age, roughly speaking, that we've just gone through about 2,000 to 3,000 years ago. The Bronze Age collapse, which lines up with what we were just seeing about the Babylonian and Assyrian Empire, and their collapse in the intermediate Bronze Age. Then we move into the Iron Age, or the Kali Yuga, and this, according to this diagram here, this Yuga lasts roughly 2,400 years. You could give or take 1,000 years either side of that. There are discrepancies about the actual time frame of these Yugas. Of course, none of us have lived for 10,000 years to determine exactly what the lengths of times are, but we've got these concepts to work with. Then, out of the Kali Yuga, we move into the Bronze Age again, but it's the new Bronze Age. It's the rise up in consciousness instead of the fall down. Then we move out of the Bronze Age into the Silver Age, and then we move back into the 10,000 years of heaven, the Golden Age. So the Iron Age, or Kali Yuga, is basically the hell realm in this concept. The Silver Age, according to Shri Yukteswar, is an age when we are in 75% Dharma, as opposed to the Gold Age when we're in 100% Dharma. During the Silver Age, as I've already mentioned, the virtue begins to decline. By the Bronze Age, we have only 50% Dharma. That means purpose or alignment with our spirit. Duality and disease emerge during the Bronze Age. Religious rituals and temple worship become necessary for us to maintain any semblance of a spiritual connection during the fall Bronze Age. The Iron Age, or the Kali Yuga, is when we have only 25% Dharma, our most recent age of darkness, materialism and hypocrisy. Like I've said, spiritual truth is absolutely hidden, and lifespans are very short. Thank God. Who wants to live a long time in the Kali Yuga? But as you can see in this diagram, there's more than one line indicating that there is an end to the Iron Age and a movement into the Bronze Age. In fact, there is an orange color for the Bronze Age, but then there's a line, roughly maybe 200 or 300 years, we would say, into the cycle of the Bronze Age. And this aligns with what I have already mentioned, that the crossover period from one age to another, it kind of mingles together for roughly 200 to 300 years approximately. And this is about where we are right now. Now, I want you to, for a second, disregard the time frame of years around the outside of this diagram. And the reason I'm asking you to do that is that there is some discrepancy about the years and the lengths, as I've mentioned. According to Shri Yukteswar, if we were to fold this diagram right down the middle, with the base of the Iron Age representing the furthest point of these two binary companions in their cycle, and the lowest point in consciousness of mankind, where we would sit would be roughly where the Iron Age is moving into the Bronze Age, roughly 2,000 years after the lowest point. And this, if we fold our diagram down the middle, reflects the end of the Bronze Age, roughly 1700 years to 2000 years before the advent of AD, end of BC, advent of AD. So it's all very interesting in terms of this mirroring effect, where the collapse of the Babylonian Assyrian Empire occurred 1700 years at the beginning of the last move into the Iron Age, according to Shuri Yukteswar. And our move into the New Bronze Age began with the French Revolution and the American Revolution around the 1700s, and it takes a 300-year crossover, which we are now at in the early 2000s. So you can see how this works, this mirroring effect of 1700 years either side of this low point of the Kali Yuga, the Iron Age. When we fold it in half, we get that low point at the very base, right in the middle. 1700 years either side, according to Shuri Yukteswar, is when the fall out of the Bronze Age began and the rise up into the New Bronze Age, now AD, begins. I hope that makes sense. It's kind of hard to describe in words alone, but hopefully this diagram can assist in our understanding, especially if we disregard the years around the outside. Shuri Yukteswar's understanding was slightly different to the years represented here. According to Shuri Yukteswar, our collapse into the Iron Age, or the Kali Yuga that we are now emerging out of, began around 2000 BC, and it takes approximately 200 to 300 years to properly transfer into the full Iron Age. And of course, if it began in 2000 BC, then 200 to 300 years would get us to 1700 BC. The darkest point of the Kali Yuga is purported to have come between 100 BC and 100 AD. This was what we might determine or call the height of the Iron Age, the height of the Kali Yuga. When I say height, I'm actually meaning the lowest point for mankind in this larger great cycle. I find this particularly hopeful for humanity's present situation, when this is coupled with the fact that Pluto is in his final out-of-bounds phase. He's never going to be out of bounds again for many, many thousands of years now. This is a legitimate interpretation that we may very well be returning to this greater level of consciousness than the Iron Age has held, to a higher level of Dharma consistent with a new Bronze Age and a rise back up in consciousness. This means that old structures from the Iron Age or the Kali Yuga must go, must be cast aside, must be kicked out, in order to be replaced by the better structures of the new Bronze Age that's forming. Quite hopeful. Now, I'm fully aware that many people will disagree with me regarding the timeframes proposed here. There is a great deal of debate around the length of time of the Yuga cycles, and even around the beginnings and the endings of the old Bronze Age. History itself has been far too tampered with to state anything in absolute concreteness. And that's okay. It's fine to disagree and debate concepts, especially if you have evidence and solid points to back up your arguments. Let's move now to our final point that ties these two concepts, the end of the historical intermediate Bronze Age, lining up with the time frame of Shuri Yukteswar's Yuga cycle, and bring them together. This year, 2026, we experienced an astrological phenomenon that is unprecedented in the Iron Age. The conjunction of Neptune and Saturn at 0 degrees of tropical Aries. This is the first degree of the tropical zodiac. I'm using tropical astrology, not sidereal here. The energy of this conjunction and the new synodic cycle that it heralds is very evident in what is happening in our world at the moment. We have wars, we have leaders who are going off their nut, we have a lot of craziness, and people can't believe the world has got to the state that it's in. It's like something old is ending and collapsing, and something new wants to be born. So this conjunction of Saturn and Neptune occurs every 36 years, and it always symbolizes turning points in history. We observe it testing existing structures, always testing the rules and the institutions and the governance in our world whenever we have this conjunction. And this is precisely the energy that is taking place on the planet right now, but in a bigger way than ever before. We are watching in real time the collapse of empires, the dissolution of borders, the upheaval of economies and governments and ideologies. Naturally, this is a time of massive change. We can expect that the results of this time, 2026, will leave us in something of a vacuum for a little while as we readjust not only to our physical world, but we readjust our mindsets and our vibration and our understanding, I believe, to align with the new Bronze Age that's being born. The question that then arises in my mind is, when has this incredible conjunction around this part of the sky, 0 degrees of Aries, the world point, the first cardinal point in the horoscope, when has this occurred before, and what did it do to our overarching history? So I began to explore this concept. I wanted to know if this is the movement into the new Bronze Age. What were the indicators of the collapse out of the old Bronze Age and the entry into the Kali Yuga period that we are now fully emerging out of? This is what I found. Firstly, let's get it straight in our mind what Saturn and Neptune are all about. Saturn is boundaries, discipline, government, structures. Saturn is responsibility and the hard reality. When it conjuncts with Neptune, it meets with Neptune's disillusion. It's dreaminess, it's spirituality, it's desire for illusions. And Neptune also has to do with the collective subconscious. It has to do with movements towards socialism. It also has to do with viruses. Very interesting combination of these two energies. Saturn wants to crystallize and make real. Neptune wants to bring something visionary into being. Now, this meeting has occurred before, around this part of the sky roughly, during the Kali Yuga. Let me tell you of 2 other times when this occurred. The Saturn-Neptune conjunction occurred at 27 degrees of Pisces, only 3 degrees from the 0 point of Aries, in 878 AD. The conjunction of Saturn and Neptune also occurred at 2 degrees of Aries in 594 BC. Again, we're only a couple of degrees off this life-changing, world-changing activation point. Not quite hitting the jackpot, but pretty close. And then I stumbled upon some real astrological gold. I'm going to show it to you now. Here you can see from my solar fire that in 1742 BC, actually around March, April, just as we fully entered into the Iron Age according to the system that we've just analysed, we saw that there was a conjunction in tropical astrology of Saturn and Neptune at 29 degrees of Pisces, the last degree of the zodiac. As we have explored, this conjunction occurred in the 1700s BC, the time of the end of the Babylonian Assyrian Empire. Fascinating. This also may have heralded the beginning of the collapse of the intermediate Bronze Age itself, which probably spanned a couple of 100 years. This is all according to the chart that we have seen on Wikipedia. Now, even allowing for shifts in the Gregorian and Julian calendar, even allowing for discrepancies and anomalies in other calendar interpretations, we still get a conjunction at 29 degrees of Pisces in tropical astrology around about this period of history. Give or take a year or two if you want to use other calendar interpretations. So this conjunction, it's so interesting, that occurred in April, according to my solar fire, even moved together across the 0 degree point of Aries. Because as you can see in this picture from my solar fire, this is actually occurring at 29 degrees and 50 minutes of Pisces. And therefore, as both planets were moving direct and not retrograde, they moved together across 0 Aries, the world point, that cardinal 0 degree point. To me, this is fascinating. This is the final degree of the zodiac, indicating the end of an age, the end of an era. Just as I believe 0 degrees of Aries, where the conjunction has previously occurred this February 2026, heralds the beginning of a new age. Very key points in the horoscope: 29 degrees Pisces and 0 degrees Aries. Now, given our two previous conversation points, the Yuga cycle, which is now at a mirroring phase where we're currently rising up into the new Bronze Age, and the end of the last or the intermediate Bronze Age in the Middle Eastern Empire, is it possible that we are witnessing the solidification right now of the new Bronze Age? And perhaps this is just hypothetical after all, but perhaps this is initiating the return of the empires that collapsed at the end of the last Yuga cycle Bronze Age. The Bronze Age fall, and now we're entering into the Bronze Age new rise up. It certainly gives us something to think about, especially if the collapse of the last Bronze Age occurred with the conjunction of Saturn and Neptune at the last degree of the horoscope, 29 degrees of Pisces. And this age begins with the conjunction of Saturn and Neptune at 0 degrees of Aries as we rise into the new Bronze Age. Things certainly do line up quite profoundly. What does this mean for humanity, my friends? Well, I think it's potentially hopeful, because once all these birth pains subside, we may find ourselves moving back to what I described at the beginning of this video: rural style communities, new social structures, and best of all, an upswing into 50% Dharma and consciousness instead of the low vibrational energy we've all had to endure in our incarnations during the Kali Yuga. What can we do to prepare for this? Well, I would suggest that simply moving in that direction would be a good start. Growing your own food, creating self-sufficient community, educating yourself beyond the mainstream narratives that are desperately trying to cling to the old paradigms. These are all worthwhile endeavors and worth you putting your energy into. To conclude, in researching all of this, I found that there was actually another rather important conjunction at the 0 degrees Aries tropical point that occurred in 2562 BC. This was a Neptune-Pluto conjunction, an extremely rare conjunction in any place in the horoscope. But in this year, 2562 BC, it occurred at 0 degrees of Aries. Like I said, it's even more rare than our potent Saturn-Neptune tango that we are observing in play right now. Perhaps I might explore that dynamic in one of my upcoming videos here at the World Astrology with Kesenya channel. I do hope you'll join me for future videos when we're going to explore exciting concepts just like this one.